Say hello to biometric measuring of our kids in the public schools, an interview with Rebecca Friedrichs about the dangers of public school teachers unions, and it's not just enough to conform to social justice, you have to think it too. Next on The Dr. Duke Show. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Duke, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Every week we cover those stories impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses across the country. Greetings to all of our listeners, and if you haven't done so yet, please take a moment and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google, or anywhere else you can listen to podcasts. Never miss an episode. Coming up later, we'll be talking to teacher and author Rebecca Friedrichs about her battle to take on destructive teachers unions, sex ed in elementary school, and her new book, Standing Up to Goliath. I recommend you get a copy, so stick around for that. But first, I want to bring in Katie Petrick for our weekly discussion of the top stories in education for the week.
Okay, we are starting off with vindication, because for years you've been out there giving, more than 700 talks at this point on Common Core and the dangers of what's happening in our classrooms. And you've been warning parents, and you've been saying, hey, parents, listen up. The schools are going to collect data on your kids. And everyone said, no, they aren't. Well, here's the vindication. We have an example coming out of Gretna, Nebraska, where parents are questioning a new fingerprint system for their elementary students' lunch program. Father Justin Osterfoss got an email from school last month saying that the Gretna Public School District is implementing state-of-the-art identification equipment for our district's hot lunch program. This equipment protects your child from others accessing his or her account. In other words, we're going to get your child's fingerprint and have it on record. And the email states they're not going to store the fingerprints, but they kind of have to if they're going to be able to recognize who the kid is. So let's get your thoughts on this.
Well, to be fair, a lot of people pointed out that the schools were collecting data on our kids, this new testing regime, all of the biometric stuff that's going on. But for us, I think where we were kind of cutting edge 6 and 7 years ago, and we were sort of scoffed at for saying it, is we were one of the first organizations to point out that biometric measuring of your kids was coming. It's not just fingerprints. It's going to be all sorts of data reads and screens. I know our producer Mike is going to roll through some old footage, 6-7-year-old footage of us showing you some of the devices and gadgets that technocrats are planning to use to measure our kids' biological responses to things. And so, yeah, it is, I suppose, moderately gratifying to know that we were right, turned out that we were right. However, it doesn't change the reality. What's really shocking about this Nebraska story is that moms and dads in this little Nebraska town, their kids were fingerprinted, so that could be entered into a database that would allow them to purchase the big government lunch by simply putting their finger in. Now, this may not seem like a huge deal, given where the country is heading technologically. However, there are real issues about this with regards to how the school's handling this, what parents were and were not told, and the fact that parents, the double talk that you're getting from the schools. We are not collecting this biometric data on your kids to hold on to it. We are going to get, but as you pointed out, Katie, I mean, for the system to work, they've got to hold on to it. And do you have any faith at all that when the school year's over, they're going to just erase that kid's data? No way. It happens one step at a time so that parents aren't outraged until somewhere 3 or 4 years down the road, really serious things are happening, and because parents haven't been paying attention and exercising their mom veto because they haven't been doing that, then they'll get shocked by it.
Yeah, in the school's response will be the school's response that they have right now is we have found that the process speeds up the lunch line or prevents the occasional issues of students entering the wrong lunch number. And what they're trying to say and trying to kind of cover up is this is going to make it easier for everyone. And that's what they always do with these, new things they come down the pipeline and the parents aren't made aware of until it's too late. Now, the dad, which I really like how he framed this, he said he made a good point saying that this is taking away from individual responsibility. Set aside the biometric part of it, but just the individual responsibility of the student to remember their number and to be able to take responsibility for getting their lunch. He said,
you need to be able to learn and do your own responsibilities, whether that's memorizing a lunch code, whether that's I need to hold onto my lunch card and not let anyone take it.
And this is just kind of another part of this story.
If they're not making your kids memorize the multiplication tables for Common Core math because that's out, do you really think your public schools are concerned about making your kid memorize his lunch code? This is not about education. This is one more way, and we can start to list, and the list becomes alarmingly long, of all the things that your taxpayer money is being spent on in the public schools. We did a show all about this last week, right? All the ways public schools are wasting your taxpayer money and the federal money too on things that have nothing to do with education. This is another example of this. I mean, this is social engineering at the highest level. We want your kids' private data. We want their fingerprints. We're going to want more and more moving down the road so we can keep your kids safe, so we can track your kids, so we can streamline efficiency, blah, blah, blah. The dad is correct. But I would say to you, to this father, if what you want is to teach your kids self-sufficiency and self-reliance, if what you want is to really give your kids a head start in life in making them self-sufficient, the last place you're going to get that's the American public school system. They are designed for conformity. They are designed for collectivism. They are designed to feed statistics and data to all sorts of federal agencies so they can monitor, track, and ultimately impact the way your kids think, vote, eat, read, sleep. That's where we're heading.
All right. We're going to stay in the lunchroom for a moment. A Connecticut elementary school has banned parents from eating lunch in the cafeteria with their kids. This is from the Darien school system. They decided to stop the practice because on a typical day, they were getting 6 or 7 parents in the elementary lunchroom. While some parents said it was time to stop a disruptive practice, others have protested at town meetings and in online forums that the change has deprived them of cherished time to check in on their children and model good social behavior.
For how long has the public school been screaming they want moms and dads more involved in their kids' education? They want moms and dads to step up and do a lot of the heavy lifting so we don't have to do it at the schools. And now you have a program where moms and dads are actually taking some time, a whopping 6 of them, taking some time to sit down with their kids in the lunchroom, and now the school is saying it's disruptive. That's the point, because mom, they don't have your fingerprint on. I would be willing to bet that if you were willing to cough up all sorts of sensitive information about your family, including your fingerprints and maybe a swab of your cheek, who knows, maybe even a pap smear, maybe they might allow you to sit with your kids. This is one more way that we see this. These public schools, these government schools, they don't want your parental involvement. When they see 6 or 7 moms sitting with their elementary school kids in the lunchroom, it's a reminder to the public schools that these teachers and these administrators are not the de facto parents, which is what they want to be. They resent your presence in the lunchroom. They resent the fact that you call them up in Nebraska to say, hey, why did you take my kid's fingerprint? And I didn't even know about it. They resent your input on your kids, not just their education, your kid's life, your kid's social order, your kid's mind, the way your kid thinks, the way your kid dresses, the way your kid eats. All of this is now the province of American public schools. They have decided that they have a greater right to parent your kid in almost every aspect of his or her development than you do. Get used to it.
The other way to look at this too is, what if your parent never does come to school? Then that's not very inclusive. So there it is.
Bingo! That's exactly why we need to throw these educational consultants out of the room. Because some moms take seriously their responsibilities to sit down and have breakfast with their kids at the school when they can. Other moms don't. So we're going to punish the moms that do look after their kids and want to spend time with their kids because it makes the kids whose parents don't show up feel bad. In other words, why don't you just leave all the parenting to us, mom and dad? We'll decide what they wear. We'll decide what they eat. We'll decide what their worldview is. We'll decide when to teach them about transgenderism. We'll decide when to give them medicine to transform them at 6 and 7 years old from boys to girls. And you just stay at home, pay your property taxes, more, so we can continue to be your parents instead.
All right. Well, across the pond in England, parents are now racist if they point out that a 30-year-old man is not a high school student. In Stoke High School, it's in Ipswich, a new pupil named Siavash showed up to school. He was born in Iran, and the teenager had been forced to flee the Middle Eastern theocracy in mysterious circumstances, and since managed to cross Europe with only a younger brother for company. Now, apparently, the 30-year-old Siavash is claimed to be 15, and he had a 12-year-old brother. At 6'1", Siavash stood head and shoulders above many classmates, while his chin was flecked with stubble. He also boasted a protruding Adam's apple and a hairline that, first from a certain angle, was starting to recede. In the cold light of day, many suspected he was nearer 30 than 20. So what happened is basically students started to talk and said, this guy doesn't look like us, like us. He's not 15. And they thought that he was lying about his age, and playground gossip got around, and apparently Siavash confided to one contemporary that he was a married father of 2 who had decided to pose as a teenager because his academic qualifications weren't recognized in the UK.
You get adults now masquerading as little kids, these transient migrants, so that they can get an education. They probably get a free lunch with it, right? Masquerading as a 15-year-old. And so what do we end up having here? Moms and dads complain that there are adult, fully biological males studying 11th grade history and math alongside their post-prepubescent children. Can you imagine if it was a cisgendered white male, 30-year-old, with chin stubble, right, who was sitting in a class with a bunch of minority girls? Do you think these ed specialists would allow that? No. But because this is the verboten, can't say anything about migrants, these are immigrants, legal or illegal, we got to let them in. Got to let them in. We got to put them in these classrooms with our children. And if you object to this as a parent, the old tried and true, I guarantee you, it's one of these goofy ed psych people, right, who's arguing that anybody who protests an adult male around all these little kids, that person is a racist. And I also think of that stupid Adam Sandler movie.
Which one?
The one where he went back to school as the adult.
Billy Madison.
Billy Madison, where he's punching out kids, and that's exactly right. And
Doyle rules.
If I wouldn't trust Adam Sandler around my 13-year-old girls, you can bet I wouldn't trust Borat either. And if that makes me a racist, bring the title home.
Well, you sound like this father of two girls who I love the British slang. I went in to complain, but I was fobbed off. They are deluded and seem more worried about how the bloke might feel. I am not aware of this lad having done anything inappropriate, but it's clearly wrong that he shouldn't be in a class with children. Now, what happened is finally the rumor mill continued until the school kind of had to take some action. They had pulled Siavash out of class, and then basically they did find that the 12-year-old is a minor. Now, they didn't say if he was actually 12, but Siavash is a man, but the brother supposedly is a minor. What's interesting is in Britain's system, there are more than 3,000 unaccompanied youngsters, and about 80% of them are male, and they are claiming asylum every year. By claiming to be children, they are entitled to free education, but they also are entitled to places in local authority children's homes. And so there's been many stories where they've had just a huge influx of what could be adult men, and these places have to take them in because they're seeking asylum.
So adult men cross borders, come to these countries illegally, and once they declare that they're minors, because, you know, heaven forbid you research this at all, right? Heaven forbid you give them a doctor's exam.
That's probably racist as well.
Right, that's racist as well. So not only do they get free quote-unquote education, but they get free room, board, they get free health care, so on and on it goes. So I would not be surprised if within 10 years you have 80-year-old men in 11th grade classrooms. It wouldn't surprise me. But I'll bet you one thing, that of all the people who have to have their DNA and fingerprints on record, bet you these guys don't. I bet you the transient migrants who end up in your kids' elementary and middle and high schools, I somehow bet they're not going to go through the same intensive vetting process. They're not going to be subject to the same kind of data gathering and collection that the rest of the kids are. I'm pretty sure that they will be exempt from the worst aspects of Western culture's big brother biometrics. Clearly, they're not part of the biometric regime because no one's paying any attention. I think the Adam's apple and the Chia Pet, during gym class, the Chia Pet chest would probably tell you if you were really interested in biometrically measuring our kids. No. Unfortunately, it's just the wee lads and lassies, right, who suffer, the English and the Scottish and the Irish, wee lads and lassies who suffer. Wee bastards indeed.
Exactly. All right. Let's take a look at another UK primary school. The school's being threatened with legal action after they intimidated a Christian mother. In September, mother Izzy Montague set up a meeting with the school head teacher after being told her 5-year-old son was not excused from the Proud to Be Me parade at Heavers Farm Primary School in London. This is a parade to promote LGBT lifestyles. So when mom showed up to say, hey, why are you refusing to let my kid not have to go to this? Head teacher Susan Pappas was there, and so was her daughter, Addie Copeman Pappas, who is supposedly the school's deputy safeguarding manager. Well, the daughter was wearing this T-shirt that says, why be racist, sexist, homophobic, or transphobic when you could just be quiet?
This is a remarkable story, too. Notice what we have here. We have a situation where this is not a mom objecting to something that's being done in a classroom. This is not a mom saying, hey, in my third grader's math class, you brought in this exercise on transgenderism. I object to that. She would have been blown off for that, too. This is an off-campus parade, right? This is an extracurricular activity. This is not part of the general education mission of the school. You're compelling, basically, a youngster, how old?
It was a 5-year-old.
A 5-year-old to participate in a gay pride parade. What does this have to do with education? And what does it say about the English moms and dads that they have to ask permission to keep their kids out of something that is not school related?
Well, and she was refused and then had to then take the second step. It's not even like you're seeking permission and you say no. She has to go and do all the legwork to say, no, my 5-year-old is not shouldn't be participating in
That's
this.
right. And still they said no. And then when she showed up at the school to protest this with the principal or the headmistress or whatever they call them over there, wee bastards, where they did that, what do they do? She brings her daughter on who's got some cushy nepotistic position in the school, and she wears a shirt basically threatening the mother, right? You have two options. You either conform to what we tell you your kid's going to do on his own time, or you're a homophobe bigot and you need to shut up.
And you should have known this, having looked at the daughter, who is a graduate student of sports sociology and feminist theory, and whose papers include a feminist psychoanalytic approach to the roles of the penis, the phallus, and hegemonic gender norms in feminist porn.
Feminist porn, right? So she's wearing her shirt then, shut up, right? And she's sports, the intersection, gotta love intersexuality, the intersection of sports, sociology, and feminism. And what's the whole thing? What's the point of the whole thing? Penis. You can never convince me, never, ever convince me that 99% of this rampant, stupid feminism is nothing more than latent penis envy. For people who claim to hate the phallus as much as they do, for people who absolutely want to dissociate themselves from the masculine, my God, they spend all their times talking about the penis.
All right, head teacher Pappas said that her daughter was not in breach of the school's code of conduct. I like Mrs. Montague because she pulled her son out of the school and now is threatening the legal action.
Good. Pull your kids out and threaten legal action. Again, do you need any further reminder that what's going on here is everything to do with every aspect of your kid's social development and very little focus on education?
Yeah, it's all bollocks.
There you go. Bullocks.
It's all bollocks.
It's all bollocks.
Bollocks. All right, I would like to tell you a story about a teacher who did not bow the knee to intersectional whims. We have Peter Vlaming. He taught French at West Point High School in West Point, Virginia for nearly 7 years. He had a freshman, and I know that's not an inclusive term, a 9th grade student who was born female and over this past summer transitioned to identify as male. So a 13, 14-year-old supposedly transitioned to now identify
Basically
as male.
Basically a 14-year-old boy, a woman, girl, 14-year-old girl who now pretends to be a boy.
Correct.
Right?
All right. The student claimed that Vlaming made the student feel uncomfortable and singled her out by not specifically referring to her as a him. Okay. Now, Vlaming taught this student in 8th grade. So Vlaming basically had this student said, have a nice summer, came back, and now the girl was saying she was a boy. Well, Vlaming agreed to call the student by a new chosen name, but avoided using pronouns to refer to the student. And apparently this violated the district's non-discrimination and harassment policies, according to the school administrators. So they suspended him, and then they took it to the school board, and after a 4-hour hearing and a 1-hour closed session, the school board voted 5-0 to terminate him.
Where's the teachers' unions? You've got literally a building in New York City where all of the sexual predator teachers who are not allowed in the classroom sit and do crossword puzzles all day and receive their full salary and benefits because the unions won't let them get fired. Here you have one situation where one teacher doesn't misgender this kid, doesn't use the wrong pronoun, just says, look, in your case, I don't believe in the pronoun thing, but we can avoid this whole problem. I will use you, every time I refer to you, I will use your chosen name. You were a boy, thinks you're a girl who now wants to use a boy's name. Fine, I'll call you by that boy's name. I will acquiesce to the choice that you want for your name. I just simply won't call you him. We'll avoid altogether the problem of pronouns. I'll always refer to you by your name. And that's not good enough for this little woke transgender kid, right? You will call me what I want you to call me, when I want you to call me that. And if you don't, we're going to get you fired. And that's exactly what happens. Again, I go back to the teachers' unions on this. We have seen these teachers' unions radically defend adult women who are sleeping with 13-year-old boys, make sure they keep their teaching credentials, make sure that they have their benefits intact. We have seen superintendents and principals engaging in racist and homophobic acts, in banning American flags from campus, from getting rid of candy canes because they're in the shape of the J that might be Jesus. All of that, the teachers' union is there to insist that these teachers and these administrators are protected. You have one high school teacher who basically said, I will call the kid by his name, but I simply will avoid using the wrong pronouns to talk about this child. And for that, unanimously, he's fired across the board, and no one seems to care.
And the administrators vehemently sided with the girl, saying that Vlaming could not treat his transgender pupil differently than he treats others. Superintendent Lori Abel says that discrimination then leads to creating a hostile learning environment, and the student had expressed that. The parent had expressed that. They felt disrespected.
Wait. If somebody calls you by your name and not something else, you feel disrespected. No, 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 no. You're not disrespected. You're entitled. You're spoiled, entitled, destructive people who, if you don't get your way and make the whole world conform to it in every way you say, you're going to try to get them fired. And we have such a screwed up public school system that the teachers, the administrators, and the school board, and apparently the union, is perfectly content with ruining somebody's career on something as trivial and stupid as that.
And I think Vlaming said it best. He said, "That's not tolerance, that is coercion. I'm being punished for what I haven't said."
That is not tolerance, that is coercion. We are now punishing you for what you don't say. That clearly is unconstitutional. That clearly is a much more significant violation of this teacher's rights than not insisting upon this or that pronoun when it's not even necessary to use them. This is a huge, huge issue, but it goes to show you. You're going to care. You are going to conform. You will not be able to hide behind equivocation. You must come out and believe and express and support. And as we'll see in a moment, you even have to have the right facial expressions. If you do what we ask you to do without a smile, we may fire you for that too.
It doesn't matter. You have to bow the knee, and if you make, even if you're bowing the knee and then you make a wrong move, it's not good enough. You're SOL.
There can be no reservation, even in the deepest, darkest corners of your own private mind and soul. If there is any aspect of you on any submolecular level that doesn't scream conformity with our new progressive overlords, we're going to fire you, period. End of discussion.
Yes.
And notice it, no retraining program, no suspension with mandatory stupid sensitivity training. We're just going to unanimously fire you for this.
Yeah, but in a way, of Vlaming, he's being the martyr in this situation. If anything is going to change about what is happening in our society with our schools and our teachers being able to be, use pronouns, not use pronouns, we're going to have teachers like Vlaming get fired left and right for it to finally.
Well, it's not enough to have them get fired. They've got to sue. And Vlaming is on the, last I read the article, he's kind of on the fence about whether or not he's going to pursue legal action. It seems to me you have every reason to pursue legal action. You're being fired without any remediation whatsoever, without unanimously fired, without any chance to atone for your sin, which I hope you wouldn't do anyway, but you're being fired simply because you wouldn't say something that you didn't have to say. You can address this kid, you can deal with this child, you can call the child by whatever name she wants without having to devolve into the pronouns. And so consequently, because you're not doing what they want you to do, forcing the issue, inserting something that doesn't have to be inserted because their politics demand it, they fired you. I can't think of a better reason to get one of these pro bono legal firms on your case and sue the living gender off of them. Sue the pronouns right off of them.
We'll see if that happens. It's also, by the way, now racist to ask students to be respectful in class. I hope you don't do this in your English classes, because you're racist then. Anita Moss is a white biology instructor at the University of Texas, San Antonio. She repeatedly warned her students to be respectful in class, to not be on cell phones, to keep their feet off their desks, and apparently that makes her racist or something. What happened is twofold. A black female student who has a history of being disruptive during class was called out by Moss during class. And it, I guess, escalated to the point where Moss called the campus cops to remove the student. And of course, people cried outrage, and they have cell phone video of it. 2 investigations were launched, and the media attention for Moss being racist quickly went viral, as you can imagine. And so here's the results of the investigations. The UTSA president, Taylor Amy, said racial bias was not a factor in the actions of the faculty member. Because a student feels the faculty member's actions were not based on racial bias, she has elected not to file a formal complaint of discrimination. So the student actually finally admitted when they went through this investigation, yeah, I was being dumb.
Well, good for her. Good for the student.
That was good. However, Moss was relieved of her duties as an instructor for the remainder of the semester. She will be required to undergo classroom management training with UTSA Teaching and Learning Services, at which point she will be allowed to return to teaching for the spring 2019 semester with ongoing monitoring.
Yeah, this is unbelievable. You got a kid who's acting up, who's being disrespectful, who's got her feet up on the desk, who's not paying any attention, who's on her cell phone. This teacher. Now, again, here's the mistake she made. She bothered to call the authorities. If this had been a Caucasian student, she'd have been fine. But you can't do it. Literally, you can't do this. Even then, you see what happens with the administration. Even though the African-American female student admitted that this was not a racial incident and that she was being disrespectful in every way the teacher said she was, the teacher teacher still didn't get fired, but she's pulled from the classroom. She has to go through all the sensitivity training. She's going to be monitored as a teacher moving forward. You can't win with these people. I mean, you literally can't win. This has nothing to do with the girl. The girl actually was a clown in class and admitted it, and admitted that it wasn't a racial incident. Here's the alarming thing. Can you imagine if this young lady was like this vindictive little transgender kid in the school we just talked about, the one in Virginia, and had said, you know what? The only reason she went after me was because I was black. I guarantee you, if the punishment for not engaging in any racial crime is radical racial retraining, can you imagine what would have happened if the kid did call it a racial hate crime? She'd be fired, and there'd be no questions asked about it.
All right. Well, this pretty face right here with all my facial expressions can get you in serious trouble. I've known it to happen to me a time or two. And now it can possibly get you expelled from college. The University of Montana Western, which, let's note, is publicly funded, has a policy that allows for punishing students for mean words or facial expressions, and that punishment could technically be as severe as expulsion. According to the Student Code of Conduct, while discussions may become heated and passionate, they should never become mean, nasty, or vindictive in spoken or printed or emailed words, facial expressions, or gestures. Committing any act prohibited by this code of conduct may result in expulsion or suspension from the university unless specific and mitigating factors are present.
And notice that they will expel you and then can be concerned about mitigating factors. So if you're sitting in a typical college campus classroom, which is going to be overwhelmingly leftist, if you're leaning in some humanities course, an English, history, sociology, anthropology, theater, art history course, and the professor's yammering on about how Donald Trump is evil, and you're sitting back there, and you've got your arms folded, or you're scowling a little bit, or you're doing this, right? You're guilty. It's not, this goes right back to what we said in the previous story. It's not enough that you take what we give you. It's not enough that you accept our one-sided social progressive engineering of your life. You have to smile. You have to be alert. You got to be eyes open. And think about it. If you're African American, as we just saw, you can be disrespectful. And the teacher's the one that gets in trouble. If you're not, evidently, if you're a typical Caucasian kid at a college campus and you simply voice your disrespect with an arched eyebrow of disbelief of how your professor is hijacking classroom time to give you a political screed, you're guilty. That arched eyebrow now, that shrugged shoulders, that clasped arms, that's enough to convey hostility. And literally, according to the student handbook of this university now, that can get you expelled. That can get you expelled. Now, I'd love to see this tested. We'd have to actually find a conservative professor in Montana. I mean, there are very few of us. We're like the squonk. You know what a squonk, the mythological animal the squonk is? We conservative professors are rarer than a squonk. Nevertheless, if we could find one of us and implant them in that school and have that conservative teacher give a conservative lecture on some humanistic topic, and then every liberal kid who pursed their lips or pouted or put their head down or shook their head no, could you actually get them expelled because they were objecting to a conservative lecture? My gut tells me no. And that's a sizable gut. It's not a small gut. My gut tells me no. If those kids were hemming and hawing and not conforming and rolling their eyes at a conservative screed, pretty sure they would not be booted from the school.
Yeah, I have to work on my RBF because if anyone else is out there like me and has an RBF and you get in trouble for it, let us know.
All right, I got to ask. RBF.
Resting bee face.
Resting bee face. Yeah, that's me. I mean, I would have a very hard time with this rule, right? I just remember in my classrooms when I was getting liberal after liberal, this is 25 years or 30 years ago, when I'm getting the liberal, it was impossible for me not to just, I mean, I was actually sighing in class too, sitting back, I would always sit in the back too, just because I didn't want to be, I tried to keep it as far away from the classroom as I could, but it's impossible when you're getting that level, and I think about this too. If indeed, simple facial gestures are enough to get you expelled when you're getting lessons. And we know what this is meant for, right? If your teacher's promoting transgenderism, if your teacher's pushing a radical gay agenda in her classroom, you better smile, right? You better be there, you better smile, you better accept it. But here's the thing. If that's true, simple facial expressions can get you expelled. You know what you're going to stop? It's going to be a lot harder for the kid who doesn't like the radical anti-Trump screed to record the classroom. It's going to be much more difficult for dissenting kids to off campus try to call attention to what's going on. If they can get you expelled just for a facial expression, what do you think they'll do to you if you try to report to outside entities the bias and unfairness that's taking place in those classrooms?
Let's go now to the interview with Rebecca Friedrichs and Dr. Duke talking about destructive teachers unions.
Our guest today is a familiar face in the world of education. Rebecca Friedrichs is a former California teacher who rose to fame when she dared to take on the powerful California teachers' unions, for which she believed all teachers should simply have the freedom to opt out if they don't want to pay union dues. She has a great PragerU video entitled Why Teachers' Unions Don't Want School Choice, and her book, Standing Up to Goliath, showcases real stories that expose state and national teachers' unions as the money and the muscle behind the degradation of American schools and culture. Your work, of course, is inspiring to a lot of people. And I mean, a lot of people, thanks to you, know just exactly how recalcitrant the unions are, how adamantly opposed to anything that's going to really improve our schools. A lot of people get that. Let me ask you this question to start, one that puzzles me. Why are so few teachers vocal like you were? Why have the unions succeeded in really silencing teachers? I've been around the country giving, hundreds and hundreds of talks on things like Fed Ed and Common Core, and whenever teachers come up to me, it's always looking over their shoulder. They want to tell me how much they support what I'm doing, but they don't want anybody else to know. What is driving teacher silence on these issues?
I am so glad you started with this question. So the state and national teachers unions have been severely bullying teachers for about 50 years now. When they showed up inside the NEA, the NEA, it was started as this sweet group of teachers just trying to reach children, really with Judeo-Christian values and support with parents, working together with parents, loving teachers, real teachers. But the unions showed up and they took us over. And from day one, they've bullied us. They've basically forced teachers to join their ranks and have silenced us. When I brought my lawsuit against the California Teachers Association and National Education Association, the number one question teachers asked me was, are you afraid for your life? And the second was, are you afraid for your job? The fear is very real. Teachers have been silenced. They are terrified, and they do believe in doing what's right for children, but they're too afraid to speak out, so we need to help them with that.
How do we do that? It seems to me that most teachers, I would argue probably 60% of teachers, really do know. It's a small number relatively that buy all the garbage, that believe that standardized tests are the answer, that sort of fall in line with increasingly federalized things like Common Core. I think it's a pretty small number. I would be willing to bet upwards of 60% of our teachers or more really do know that we are not giving kids a very good education in the subjects. What can teachers do without necessarily having to do what you did, take the unions to court? What can teachers do on a ground level to try to guarantee that our kids are getting a good education in spite of all the pressure that's being brought to bear, not just by the unions, but by the progressive superstructure that tends to run the schools to begin with?
Right. Well, that's exactly why I wrote my book. So Standing Up to Goliath is a book full of stories. It's my story, and it's the stories of dozens of other teachers from across the country. Teachers who have served inside of the National Education Association as representative assembly leaders. Teachers who've served in the state level leadership, served on their local level. And we all found out that if we dared to question union think or union politics, we were squelched. So the reason I wrote the book is to give voice to real teachers. Like you said, you think 60%. The union's own internal surveys show that 60% of teachers have conservative values. I've discovered from my own experience, it's more like 75% of teachers who really do love the kids and are doing a pretty good job and want what's best and want choice and all of these things, but they've been silenced. So the answer is for parents, faith leaders, community leaders, to stand together with teachers, to get around them, to get an arm around them. I call it adopt a teacher. Adopt every teacher you know and help them to gain a voice because they've been silenced. They want to speak out, but they're too afraid because they're alone and they go to work every day and they get bullied and harassed. They're afraid they're going to lose their job, afraid they'll lose their pension. They believe in all kinds of lies. So we just need to stand together with them. That's the answer.
Are there alternative teacher groups outside of the unions that might allow teachers to band together to stand up collectively? I think most teachers would recognize and be much more vocal if they knew there was this big network of teachers from coast to coast who were speaking out on these issues. Do any such movements exist?
Well, we just built one. So as I wrote this book, I thought to myself, what are these teachers going to do once they read the truth? They find out that they're not alone, that there are many of us who've been bullied and who want to speak out. Now, where do they go? So I started something called For Kids and Country. It's a nonprofit. And our goal is uniting, engaging, educating, and empowering parents, teachers, community leaders in the fight to restore our schools and our culture. So we've built that. They can go to our website, forkidsandcountry.org, get all kinds of information. And there they can learn about these organizations that you asked about that offer them things like liability insurance, offer them a way to organize without the union. There's Association of American Educators, Christian Educators Association International, and other local groups. We aim to help teachers create a community. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, our website, just giving these teachers a voice so that they'll realize they're not alone and we can all stand together. One last thing about what you asked is, it's real important for teachers to learn. Thousands of them have asked me, Rebecca, is there a way I can keep my local association? I like standing together with my local teachers in this corrupt system, but get rid of the state and national. The answer is yes, they can do that. So we help them to learn that they can actually decertify or disaffiliate from the state and national, because right now their local is legally tied to those. So most of their money is going to far left politics that the unions favor. They can stop that and create a local only association, pay a whole lot less money, keep all that money local, quit funding politics. We could really do some major reform in our schools if we could get the state and national teachers unions out. If teachers need to get out and buy your book, give them a recommendation. How do they get a hold of a copy of your book? Yeah, thank you. The best way is to go online. It's available on Amazon, Target, Walmart, Barnes & Noble. I created an audio version, so if they're busy or they commute, they can listen to it on audio. It's also on Kindle. So Standing Up to Goliath, they just type that in by Rebecca Friedrichs. They should be able to find it. We have a couple of Goliaths here. There's not just the unions. I'm a professor of English at a university here in Wisconsin, and one of the things I get routinely every year are students who are training to become high school English teachers. And when I listen to these kids tell me the way they're being trained, the anti-literary views they're being given, the empty-headed multiculturalism, the social justice activism that's really transforming their education. My kids tell me, my education majors tell me, they take the same multicultural class 4 or 5 different times under different categories. Meanwhile, nobody's teaching them how to teach kids to write better or read better. Just your thoughts on university departments of education and to what degree they're contributing to the degraded education that the kids are getting now. Yeah, I'm super glad you asked this, because guess what? That's the teachers' unions too. One of the things I show in my book is the resolution documents and some of the new business items that the teachers' unions pass each year. You will be shocked. They are behind the divisive rhetoric in this culture. For instance, this year they gave their President's Award to Colin Kaepernick, and then union leaders took a knee during the national anthem. They are behind the rewriting of our history. They are behind what you're talking about is an infiltration of our teacher colleges that used to be outstanding. We used to train teachers in a classical liberal arts education, which was sound and wonderful and the envy of the world. We've removed all of that and replaced it with all of this multiculturalism and other things you're discussing, women's studies. It's all the teachers' unions. They are pushing all of that. It's all in their documents. They work together with many other groups like Southern Poverty Law Center, Planned Parenthood, ACLU, the whole bunch of very powerful groups. But the reason I say the unions are where we need to focus our energies is because they're the root that's getting this into all of our schools, preschool all the way through the university, and they're taking money from teachers, billions a year, billions, and spending it on all this far left politics and destroying our educational system, and teachers have no idea. So we just need to educate teachers, get them out of that system so that we can bring restoration.
And I'm pretty sure I know where you're going to go with this next answer. The unions do have their fingers in all these pies. But one of the things I know you also care deeply about, and we've spent a lot of time on this show trying to expose, is the degree to which they are using the American government schools to sexualize children at really young ages. I know firsthand that the unions are pushing this as well. The teacher colleges are pushing this as well. Talk a little bit more about what they hope to gain, the unions, by sexualizing children as young as elementary school.
Yeah, it's actually going down to preschool now. So they very much are sexualizing children, and they've been sexualizing teachers. They've been indoctrinating all of us for decades in this sexualization of children, teaching little children that they should be performing anal sex and all kinds of sex from very young ages, very inappropriate stuff that I don't know one parent or teacher who agrees with all of it. Why do I think they're doing it? I believe they are trying to completely transform our culture, and they're starting from within the schools, and they bully teachers. If teachers say, hey, I'm not going to teach that, that's child abuse, they say, that's fine. You don't have to teach it. We'll bring in the experts. Planned Parenthood and their friends teach it. It's very troubling. One of the things people don't realize is that the teachers union's goal is to transform our culture. These are people who are pushing their own personal, social, sexual, and political agenda. They really are the right arm of the Democrat, far left part of the Democrat Party. They are writing their talking points. I've seen it with my own eyes, where teachers like myself hear these talking points, homophobe, calling people who disagree with them Nazis and things like that. Teachers have heard that for years and years, and then suddenly it comes out in the form of Democrat talking points. So these unions are truly trying to transform our culture. I believe trying to tell our children what's normal and undermining parental authority and teacher authority, and we have got to fight back.
Yeah, I think the takeaway from this interview is the American schools now, through the large aegis of the teachers' unions, with all that control and money, they are using our kids against us. They are using our kids as pawns in their own wicked progressive agenda. They are trying to transform the culture by separating kids from parents. One of the reasons you sexualize little children is to divorce those kids from their parents' worldview, religious worldview. It really is insidious. It's the kind of thing that went on in Soviet schools, and it really needs to come to an end. The unions are really behind this. Rebecca, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. I hope our paths cross again soon. Keep up the great work.
All right, for the final story, we actually have a tragic story of a 9-year-old black girl named Mackenzie Adams who committed suicide because allegedly she was being bullied for being friends with white people. Her grandma found that she had hanged herself. Now, the 4th grader Mackenzie attended U.S. Jones Elementary School in Demopolis after transferring from her elementary school in Linden, where her mother and grandmother said she had been bullied. Her mother, Jasmine Adams, and her grandmother complained to the State Board of Education about the bullying that Mackenzie was experiencing, which allegedly continued then at her new school. And Mom said, Mackenzie told me that this one particular child was writing her nasty notes in class. It was just things you wouldn't think a 9-year-old should know. And my baby to tell me some of the things they had said to her, I was like, where are they learning this from? Part of it could have been because she rode to school with a white family, and a lot of it was race. Some of the student bullies would say to her, why are you riding with white people? You're black, you're ugly, you should just die.
Yeah, in other words, this is, and why this is not going to be as big a deal as it should be. This is why the American Educational Administration, countrywide, isn't going to really take this seriously. Because you had black kids hounding to suicide a little black girl because she dared to have white friends and white relations. It's really a remarkable thing. This kind of counterfactual here at this time is perhaps a little crass. But imagine for one moment if you had a little black girl who was being harassed by white people because she only hung around with other black kids, or if there's any kind of switch in this demographic, right, it would be a huge deal. This would be a national front and center story. This would occupy the mainstream media for weeks, and this is in Alabama, right? It's not in New York. And this is one of the logical consequences of what you get when you structure schools on the basis of social justice. One of the reasons why this little girl's bullying claims and her parents' bullying claims were not taken seriously, it's because it was black kids doing the bullying of other black kids. If this was white kids bullying a black student, you damn well bet this would have been dealt with harsh and fast. But it wasn't. And this little girl, I mean, remember 30, 40 years ago, I remember this when we were little kids. It was always the subtle pressure for black students. If you do well in the schools, right? If you get good grades, if you're committed to your own education, why are you acting white? I remember that from the late 1980s, this stigma that was going on, this kind of we don't snitch, we don't talk to cops, we don't pay attention in school, very destructive, right? And by the way, something that the African American community has to deal with. That is not a consequence of white privilege. Getting an education is not the privilege of white people. You have every opportunity in this country, regardless of your race, to try to pursue a good education. But I remember when I was a kid, the argument was to be black and to be successful in school was to be acting white. The logical consequence of this 30, 40 years later is if you have any association with white people whatsoever, if you see whites as anything other than oppressors and interlopers and racists and bigots, well, then you're a bigot too. And the fact that they called her an ugly person because she dared take a ride to school from her white friends or the family of her white friends shows you the degree to which this social justice education is not only not improving education, it is destroying race relations. It is destroying children, not just white kids. This whole social justice education was designed to put white kids in their place, to knock them down, to pull back the achievement of white kids in suburban schools, to lower the overall standards of education for primarily white students, not to fix what was broken with black kids in school or minority kids in school, but to level the playing field by holding successful kids. And we see with Asians too, the attempt to hold down successful Asian students rather than try to lift up more struggling minority students. Common Core, the name common in Common Core, the social justice aspects of this is to commonize education by making it lower. In other words, we would rather have a country of low-achieving kids across the board if those kids all low achieve racially across the board the same way. And you see how these circumstances begin to funnel out here. You are not just demonizing white kids, which you're very successfully doing, by the way. All this white privilege, all of this white guilt that you're fostering on little kids too absolutely young to even understand the difference in their races or what they stand for historically. By pushing all that guilt on them, you're having the reverse effect on some of these minority kids. You are entitling them to the same kind of hatred you think you're fighting by denigrating white people. And now it's resulted in a full-blown suicide that cannot be blamed on anything else other than your social justice posturing in schools. Let's move back to a school system that values all children made in the image of God, all children made as tiny little beautiful individuals, not part of not a cog in your social justice collectivist machine. Let's start treating kids as kids again. Let kids show compassion for kids. Let's encourage kids to have friends across races rather than playing these silly games. The worst bulliers in the public schools are not the children. They are the educational administrators who force this nonsense onto their teachers and into their curriculums, and now you've paid a terrible price for it. Sadly, it's a lesson you're not going to learn because you just don't care.
And we'll wrap the Dr. Duke Show up with that. Make sure you head over to drdukeshow.com where you can subscribe to our podcast. We're on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, all of your great platforms. And while you're there, maybe leave us a nice 5-star review. If you don't like what you heard today, maybe just don't say anything. But if you could tell all your friends, we'd appreciate that too.
That does it for us this week on The Dr. Duke Show. If you like what you heard, please share the podcast with your friends. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and we'll see you next time.